We are here live at, where am I? Can we do that again? No? We are here live at UFC Fight Night 89. We're going to cover Rory MacDonald, Stephen Thompson, and we got a special guest coming right up.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Well, that was a flub up that's going to be added to the blooper reel.
Live internet, my friend. Doesn't matter.
The last one, too, where my seat dropped. Remember?
There's something about
bad luck.
There's something about you in the driver's seat, my friend.
I don't know. Whatever. But we are here live, UFC Fight Night. We're going to cover it. MacDonald versus Thompson, and we have a special guest in the house. Let's introduce everybody.
Hey guys, I'm Gabriel Gonzalez. To talk UFC and anything else I'm a part of at AfterBuzz TV, you can follow me at Double G on TV.
J10-716 right here, sitting next to me. In the hot seat is Josh Gross, pioneer MMA journalist. We've been trying to get him on here for a very long time. He's got a book coming out in about 8 hours as we record this. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yes, real quick. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Yeah, just real quick. I know you guys. You just wrote a book, Ali versus Nanoki. Comes out in a few hours. You can go to Book Circle Online. You guys talked all about it. We're gonna get a little bit more into it. Later on in the show, we got a fight night to cover 2 nights ago from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. First ever fight night from Ottawa. With an A. A-T-T-A-W-A. No.
OTT.
I got the wrong hashtag on Twitter. I'm sorry, America.
But yeah.
No, you should be sorry, Canada.
I'm sorry, Canada.
All right, cheesy joke of the day. You know how Canada got their name?
Oh, I heard this one.
No,
Go for
I've
it.
never heard this one before.
So they had a bunch of letters in a hat, and they were picking letters out of a hat. They were like C-A, N-A, D-A.
Nice.
Canada.
Nice. Well done.
But yeah, we're here to talk all about it. We have a lot to talk about. A lot of news today. UFC being sold, GSP coming back.
Wow.
But yeah, like I said, a good fight night 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
Rory MacDonald versus Stephen Thompson. I can be a little biased at times. Everybody knows I'm a big Stephen Thompson fan. So, like I said, we're going to run down the card. Do you have the card in front? I know you like to usually run down the card real quick.
I do here. Starting at the beginning, and I got to be honest, guys. University of MMA Fight Night 13 happened this weekend, and several other things. So I got to be honest, I had not had a chance to watch this fight night. Stepping in to talk about some of the other news. I'm looking right at the fourth wall, so yeah. To be fair to everybody, I don't want to BS my way.
It's like when you show up for test day, but you didn't do any studying.
And you still get an A. We'll find out.
Opening the show at flyweight, Ali Bagautinov beat Gian Herrera. I assume Gian is correct pronunciation. Josh can correct me for sure.
You're doing fine, Jay. Don't worry about it.
Welterweight, Colby Covington over Jonathan Munir by submission in the third, rear naked choke. There was a catchweight, 117.5 pounds. I believe that was modified, I'm guessing, from weigh-ins. Randa Marcos, the Quiet Storm, over Jocelyn Jones-Lineberger. That was a unanimous decision. Elias Theodorou versus Smiling Sam Alvey, AfterBuzz guest alumni. Elias Theodorou over Sam by unanimous decision.
I'm sorry, Sam.
I was going to say
he should have came on right before the fight. Usually our guests win their fights right after that.
The good luck karma did not work this time for him. At bantamweight, Joe Soto over Chris Beal by submission in the third, also a rear naked choke. Middleweight, Krzysztof Jotko over Tamden the Bearcat McCrory. First round finish. It was a knockout. It was one of, I think, Tamden's second match back in the UFC since a pretty long hiatus. Light heavyweight, Misha Sirkunov over Ian Cutelabra by submission. Arm triangle choke, they say here, in the third. Lightweight, heading up it was the main event of the prelim card, Jason Sago over Leandro Silva by split decision. On the main card, opening up was women's flyweight JoJo Calderwood, George's ex-girlfriend, over Valerie Letourneau. JoJo won by TKO in the third. Lightweight, after that, Olivier Aubin-Mercier over Thibaut Goudy. He caught him with a submission in the third. Steve Bossy at light heavyweight over Sean, the real OC.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, unanimous decision. In the co-main event, Donald Cerrone over Patrick Cote with a TKO in the third. And in the main event, going 5 rounds, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson over Rory MacDonald, Red King, unanimous decision, 50-45, 50-45, 48-47. So it was depending on what seat you were sitting in, it was either a clean sweep or it was really close.
It was a shutout, very clearly on.
Yeah.
I think, well, we'll get right into that. I might actually got to point out, I didn't know that Rory changed his name again. I mean, he's been Waterboy, Aries, the Red King, and I feel like...
Was he Waterboy?
Yeah,
I
very
don't
early
remember
on
that
in
one.
his career, like when he first fought Carlos Condit, he was
Yeah.
still, when he was the youngest guy in UFC, and I was like, well, I mean, it's all about branding yourself. They're all wearing the same Reebok shorts now, so you know what? Go for it.
Waterboy is a good nickname to go away from, for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
Got that Bobby Boucher look kind of going.
Yeah, you caught the fights, right, Josh?
I just saw the main event. I was actually at the U of MMA. I was signing my books, and they had nice enough to have me in the cage and talk to me. But I just saw the main event: Stephen Thompson, Rory MacDonald, and that was really the one fight I was interested in most. I think the storylines coming into it really compelling. MacDonald seeking free agency, really trying to go off and into the sunset of the UFC and with a win. You're talking about the toll of fighting Robbie Lawler. What did that have impact on him? Clearly that did have an impact. And then Stephen Thompson's a dynamic fighter, one of these guys that we thought we knew what mixed martial arts was, right? All you had to do was wrestle a little bit, do some Muay Thai, and you'd probably be good, a little jiu-jitsu. He's a very unique fighter, and his style, I think, is fun to watch and, pretty aggressive on the evening. I thought he put together a good performance and deserved the victory.
Now, personally, I was a little curious about Rory MacDonald. Here's a guy who hasn't fought in 11 months, and the last memory we remember him of his brute. I guess I don't want to say brutal because that kind of underwhelms just the physicalness of just how that fight went. But just, I mean, last I remember, he just crumbled down, and you got to think like
It was a brutal match on both sides.
yeah, exactly.
He just couldn't take any more in that fight.
I say more so MacDonald because Lawler has fought since then. But you look at MacDonald where you have a fight like that. What did that do to you mentally? And even to the point where I think he broke his nose again. And you got to think maybe a little bit more hesitation on his part. So it's kind of like, I know he wanted to come off strong. I know he's going to enter free agency, whether it's going to be with UFC or Bellator, which he's fighting, whatever it is. But again, I feel like the Rory MacDonald from yesterday is different from like 2 years ago. And I think a lot of it had to do with that Robbie Lawler fight.
Definitely.
think
I
so.
think that that's the kind of fight that takes time off of your career after you've been through them. You just can't go through one of those unless you're Robbie Lawler, every single fight. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of it. And definitely the ring rust. Like you just said, he hasn't been in the cage for more than a year, about a
little
year,
under
coming up on it. It's got to be a factor, especially when you see how active Stephen Thompson has been also. You got to factor that into it.
I mean, here's a guy who's 26 years old, but by no means a youngster in the cage. This guy is, I think it's fair to say he's a veteran in the cage.
Yes.
So where he goes from here, who knows? I mean, definitely with the sale, who knows what that's going to be like, with free agents, but it should be interesting. What do you
I've
guys
always joked in the past, Robbie. Well, other people as well. They talk about him as the Canadian nightmare, and he's always Canadian killer, right? Canadian.
Rory, you're talking about? Oh, Rory.
Yeah, Canadian Psycho. Excuse me,
Yeah.
Rory.
Oh, yeah.
And he's always struck me as he's so reminiscent of Patrick Bateman, American Psycho. So to that end, I wonder. It sounds like this the Lawler match more so. This was evidence that the Lawler match turned him from Patrick Bateman to Jason Bateman, perhaps.
Maybe Justine Bateman.
Nice.
Who knows?
I don't know about that, but it sounds like it did humanize him a bit.
I don't. I mean, it pulverized him, is what it did. I mean, he. That was the thing I was really wondering, is like the effect of the Robbie Lawler match. I mean, there's no doubt. Mentally is one thing. These guys are so mentally tough, and to step back in the cage and preparation, fine, okay. I was much more worried, honestly, physically. The toll that takes. People say, "Oh, Robbie Lawler took a beating too," but that was much more cosmetic. I mean, he was battering Rory MacDonald, and MacDonald hung in there to the point that he just couldn't do it anymore. I saw him flinch a couple times against Stephen Thompson.
Yes.
That was really surprising to me, and I think indicative of a lot of where he is as a fighter. It's a tough one. This is a brutal game. That's why fighters deserve much more than they get, because from one event to another, everything can change. And I think we saw that that reality with Rory MacDonald, I think, is something that manifested in that Lawler fight. And we saw now what Stephen Thompson did to him. And Stephen Thompson slugged it out, and he's not the biggest puncher in the world, and he's still really at the end of that. Rory was looking pretty similar to how he looked against Lawler. He was battered and beaten. I think that's going to be the MO throughout the rest of his career now. It's just his face is going to bleed. I mean, that's just how he does it.
Yeah, definitely. He's turning into a bit of a Diaz brother in that way, in that, after so many battles, he's just easier to cut. And like you just said, what's shocked me the most is his lack of output. He's always been a slow starter. He was like that against Robbie Lawler too. So at the first round, it didn't surprise me that the output wasn't there. But when you started getting to the second and third, when he was clearly in striking range, and the fact that he just kind of stood there with his arms outstretched, not really going for anything, that's when I thought, he's a little different. There's some kind of problem.
Yeah.
And especially when Thompson started to increase his output and Rory didn't even try to change up the game plan, because he's a bigger guy, if I'm not mistaken, than Steven. I would just at least looking to see if maybe he initiated the clinch a little more. I felt like that's where Rory would have had a big advantage, but it just wasn't there for him all night.
No, but you have to credit Thompson too, right? I mean, his speed and his footwork really thwarted anything that Rory did. Rory was very basic in that fight. He didn't, he relied on a left hook and a jab, and he didn't do too much other than that.
Yeah.
And against a guy like Stephen Thompson, who moves so well, you're gonna look silly at certain points, and I think that's what happened.
Well, let's talk about Stephen Thompson for a bit. I mean, here's a guy, obviously, he's got that karate background, that karate style, the wide leg stance, and just kind of gives him the range. But here's also a guy that he's so much more than a karate guy. Every single fight that he's had in the last few years, especially since that Matt Brown loss, he just shows us something new every single time. Johnny Hendricks, none of us thought he was going to knock out Johnny Hendricks so quickly. Me personally, I didn't think that this fight was going to last 5 rounds either, but it did. But he definitely saw like an evolution of Wonder Boy. Do you guys agree, disagree?
I agree. When I look back, I haven't kept up too much with Steven. I know he's moved up the ranks, but as far as him making an impact every card, I kind of lost track after Matt Brown, and I've had to kind of say, he had that fight with Patrick Cote. He had a good fight with Jake Ellenberger. But the Johnny Hendricks fight, it really opened a lot of people's eyes that, you know what, he's not just benefiting from good matchups anymore. He really is one of the top guys in the division now, and he has added a more diverse game to his arsenal to complement the striking.
I think that's right.
The thing that I noticed too is he did get tagged a little bit. There were, and especially in that fifth round, maybe it was the lack of strength for it being the fifth round. I thought Thompson, I was kind of worried for him for a second, but he shows that he does have the chin. Where he goes from here, I think it's fair to say title shot would be next. It's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, it's hard to deny him. I
think it depends on what GSP does and what they want to do with GSP.
That is a good point.
So, but he's right there. I mean, he was there before. I think the Hendricks fight convinced a lot of people that maybe he deserves it. Now, certainly, beating Rory MacDonald puts him in position to do that. But, with the UFC, you're never quite sure. And then if GSP comes back and it's a 170, I couldn't imagine GSP fighting at 170 with the belt not on the line. If Lawler beats Tyron Woodley, I would love to see Lawler against GSP. That would be. I'd prefer to see that than a Thompson fight.
Yes, that would be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, he's teased a lot too that he wants to fight guys like Michael Bisping. So I don't know if that just means. And he said before, once he goes up to 185, he's not going to go back down to 170 either.
Yeah, I don't care about seeing GSP at 85. I have no interest in that. I mean,
has he said that recently?
Well,
he said that
a
today.
long time ago.
When that dream fight with Anderson Silva was getting talked about, there
was years ago.
Oh yeah,
but there's a lot of talk about him fighting Bisping. I mean, that's in his people were saying that, and potentially. I don't see any point in that fight. That's not even a fun fight to promote because Bisping can't talk all his trash against a guy like GSP who won't return the favor and won't, be on the other side of that. So I don't see the benefit for that fight. It doesn't make sense. Bisping should go fight somebody else at 85. That whole division's a mess, and they can throw somebody in there. Let GSP be the great welterweight. If he really wants to fight again, it's not like he was the most exciting fighter in the world. The reason people really cared about George St. Pierre because he won every time. And, he went out on a fight that a lot of people thought he probably didn't win that fight against Johnny Hendricks. I think he needs to go back to 70 if he's going to fight and, prove that he is or isn't the best guy in the world. He still might be. And, that's where the intrigue is for me to watch GSP fight.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, I feel like one of the big reasons he never did take the fight with Anderson, even if he could make 185, he just gives up too many advantages in terms of size, reach, height. And so 170 definitely always suited his frame better. And regarding Michael Bisping, it's today's MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, where he made a lot of points that he felt that he was just a better fighter all around than Michael Bisping, and felt that would be a good matchup. Which on paper, if everything equal, he's probably right as far as being a well-rounded fighter. But once again, the size issue, that just changes the ball game in my opinion. And I agree, he should be fighting at 170.
I agree with, it doesn't make sense to throw him into 85 because it's kind of like cooking. There's so many tastes that go together. And I don't want to go so far as to say George St. Pierre tastes better at 170. That's a really bad thing for me to say. That's not going to come out right in any way, shape, or form. But he fits in 170, whereas you throw him in 85, and it just mixes up too many other things. It kind of puts everything else on hold. I just adding to that. I mean, I don't see any benefit to him going to 85, and then the rest of the weight classes kind of being put on hold for that, you know?
Well, speaking of the 170 weight division, we have another guy that kind of, in my opinion, rose up in that division regardless of where he fights.
Oh, yes.
You have Donald Cerrone, who I think a lot of people at first were like, well, he's better suited at 155, but I think he's better suited at either one. The guy is willing to fight in any division that he wants to. Obviously, you throw him in middleweight, I'm sure he'll find a way to make the weight. But here's a guy, Patrick O'Tay, very legit. Guys, he's been around for a while. Got the
He's
experience.
205, former 205 or 85 or going down to 70.
But Donald Cerrone, in my opinion, he looked flawless.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who just gets. I don't want to say gets better. I mean, I think we expect this out of Cerrone, but I didn't expect him to be this good at this division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was ready for. If he had to stand and trade with Cote not last night, but Saturday night, he would have been able to. I was shocked at just how much power he carries against a guy like Cote. Solid chin, good striker himself. And you're right, Cowboy, he really looks sharp at 170. This is now his second fight since losing to Dos Anjos. He wasn't really on a bad stretch at 155, barring that one loss. So it's very interesting. I found it surprising he's not ranked yet.
He is now. He went up to 14.
He went up to 14 now. They had that updated. So yeah, there's a few fights up there for Cowboy. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing him fight against Matt Brown. I was also thinking, I know there's a bunch of reasons, rankings, the fact they're in the same gym, but watching that fight with Cote, I would really love to see him and Carlos Condit throw down.
Now, Josh, how much do you think that Donald Cerrone can make an impact in that welterweight division?
I think it's tough for him. Donald's hit and miss. When he's on fire, he can beat anybody on any given night. Sure. But then, I'm not sure. I was surprised by his performance. I only saw the highlights of the Cote fight. To me, it was a contest that I thought Cote would have success at. I thought he'd grind out a win. He'd be a little too strong. His defense was too good for Cerrone. And like I said, with Cerrone, one night he can look like the most amazing fighter in the world, and the next night, there's some holes in his game. Rafael Dos Anjos kind of ran through him, and you figure, well, how does a guy like that get run through at 155 and then survive at 170? So the weight cut suited him this time. There was, I think that works for him well, but you never know. It's a division full of really strong wrestlers. It's changed some over the years. There's a lot more strikers now, but he used to be dominated by wrestlers, and I think that might be troubling for Cerrone, although his ground game can be sneaky. So it's a tough one. I put nothing past him. I mean, there's a guy with a lot of guts, and he's going to fight anybody at any time. And so,
I mean, assuming that he does fight at 170 next, who would you guys put against Cerrone next?
I don't know. I mean, there's
Rick Story stands out in my head. I don't know why exactly, but Rick Story is somebody that if they're going to give Cerrone a shot to try and build him up in 170, that's somebody we're putting on my promoter's hat probably. I'd book Cerrone and Story. Some of these other matches, I mean, they're guys still, well, maybe Matt Brown as well. Because that's going to be great stand and bang, but it'll also be a great scrap. There'll be a lot of scrambles on the ground if it goes to the ground.
It sounds like Cerrone wants to fight soon, especially with him kind of complaining about the payout. And I've said this before. I think it's complete BS that Dana White's going to cater to Conor McGregor. Not to say that McGregor doesn't deserve whatever he gets, but his reasoning behind McGregor always steps up. McGregor always does. Well, Donald Cerrone does that too.
Cerrone steps up.
Cerrone probably even more so. He'll probably fight on UFC 200 if you want him to. And I'm sure he was throwing his head in for to replace.
He did on the post-fight show, Megan O'Leary.
Really?
Yeah, he was saying it's like UFC 200. They have a lot of fights on. I'm pretty sure you could get me in one of them. And Mousasi is out of an opponent, so. I mean, what's he gonna do? Weigh in with like quarters in his shorts or something?
I don't know.
He seems like the guy who would want to try that, but I guess we'll wait and see. But
we'll wait and see.
You could put the money on you could put the house down. He's gonna fight sooner rather than later.
I'm sure he's gonna fight at UFC 201 or 202.
Right.
We'll see how that goes. The next fight, Sean O'Connell versus Steve Bossy. Personally, my favorite weigh-in
Your favorite weigh-in guy.
weigh-in guy, Sean O'Connell. Did you guys see that one?
I didn't catch
missed
the
it.
weigh-ins. What did he do this time?
He blew bubbles. So that way, like, you know, when they're posing, you can see the bubbles, like, kind of.
On one hand, well, he lost by Yude. I don't know how much punishment he took, but
Oh,
They both took punishment.
You
was it?
were-
I
It
didn't
did
see
win
it, but
fight.
apparently it was a crazy fight.
Fight of the night.
it wasn't a barn burner. It was a whole town on fire kind of fight.
Oh, goodness.
Boss landing some heavy shots, but then O'Connell came back to just drop him. It seemed he knocked him out almost similar to Czech Congo Pat Barry, where Congo he just got laid out flat, but he came right back. It was that kind of fight, and for 3 rounds in the second and third, Steve Bosse came back and he was just a little more accurate, a little more active, and he got the decision despite losing the first round. But that was just such a fun fight all around, just complete Rock'em Sock'em Robots style fight. I loved it.
This is one of those fights where, and I find it hard to believe that, you know, you perform like that, even if you lose, it's hard to, like, release you from your contract. You know,
Right.
obviously we've
Yes.
seen a lot of releases go back in the past few months, and I really think even though Sean O'Connell hasn't really been that successful in the past few months, or a few fights, he's not gonna, I don't think they're gonna.
he has his ups and downs.
Yeah,
You know,
but I
win
think,
2, lose 2.
But I think like after because he's won 2 out of his last 6. But I think after a performance like that, it's hard to like and you know it's hard to release the guy. You know, it's hard to fire
Right.
the guy. You know, it's bottom line is show up to fight, show up to I don't want to say perform, but just show up, and you'll be fine. You don't have to worry about having a scrap for food or going to some other promotion. But
And the UFC rewards the fact that he left it all out there. And I think, if he had just kind of started coasting or just curled up, no, he kept trying to throw haymakers at Bosse the entire fight. So I can't see him getting cut so easily. I think they'll give him at least one more fight.
I'm sure it was a fun fight. Like I said, rounding out the card, Olivier Aubin-Mercier defeated Thibaut Gouti.
Guti.
Another fight that I kind of want to talk about for a second, Joanne Calderwood versus Valerie Letourneau.
Yes.
The first UFC fight at the flyweight division for the women.
That's right.
As you mentioned, JoJo Calderwood, Ultimate Fighter. Obviously we cover that show. Ultimate Fighter 20, was it?
21,
Season
I think.
20?
Was that the...
No, season 20.
That was the first all-female
No,
season, right?
That was an
Yes.
all-female season, which was...
Season 20.
With Pettis and Melendez. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it doesn't sound like they're bringing in a bunch of flyweight women, but still kind of a fun fight to watch. I know you wanted to talk about it for a second.
Yeah, I think it illustrates a great point, that difference between, for the women, having 115, then the next available option is 135. There's a bunch of them that profit from being right there in the middle. Calderwood is one of them. Letourneau obviously didn't quite take as much advantage of it, but it was just a great fight for JoJo Calderwood. I think a lot of people thought that Letourneau was going to be more well-rounded. She has that championship fight experience now. But Calderwood just looked good. I always find it so interesting. She has the most unassuming voice out of anyone in MMA, but she still just fights with like that gangster. She will throw down. Even when she's down, she'll keep fighting, and it was just a great one. The finish, she dropped Letourneau with the body shot in the first round. That finish at the end of the third, it looked like Letourneau was hurt. She tried to hide it. I can't speak for Letourneau with the wardrobe malfunction that they pointed out on the broadcast.
Did another one happen?
No, she was. It looked like something had been knocked loose with a kick, and Letourneau, she literally stopped fighting to almost like, "Hey, I'm gonna fix it," but the ref didn't stop the fight. That's what I found interesting.
There was a few times where she got hit in the gut and she turned around,
Yes.
and then like they're just, we'll keep fighting. Like, well, I don't think she can anymore.
Yeah, and then that's what ended it. In the final frame, she took the body shot. She turned her back to JoJo. JoJo followed up with a nice little combination, ended with that spinning back fist, and just a great finish for JoJo. Loved it.
Great finish, and I want to talk about her for a second because she put it. She kind of was mentioning, or they talked about on MMAfighting.com that she's already broke as hell. Her exact words. Yes. Some of the payouts and whatnot now segue into the UFC getting sold because they're apparently the bid's done. They put in the bid. It's getting sold for and how long it's going to be ready? Who knows? But that's kind of a big deal. No longer will the Fertittas and Dana White be in charge of the UFC.
When
solely in
Dana
charge.
White is apparently still going to be there. But
when Strikeforce was sold, I remember I think tweeting or an article I wrote saying that there are no more shots to be heard around the world with MMA. Apparently, I was wrong about that one. You know, and the rumors and the stories go back that far. I'm not a business guy, so you know I didn't necessarily see this one coming. You know, and that was obviously many years ago anyway. But for it to come out, I feel like the headlines have come out so super fast, and for the deal to be reported to be closed now, to me, kind of that's the shot heard. That's the MMA shot heard around the world. So I sit corrected from what 2010. Yeah.
Well, for myself personally, just because we've seen the almost clickbait type headlines back and forth. Oh, they sold it. Oh, Dana White, we're not selling it. I thought that it was just more for attention, just because, you know, you imagine it's got to be such a profitable thing. How can you sell something that's probably going to grow over time still? But if it is true, UFC sold $4.2 billion. We were talking about it before the show. We hope that the issues in MMA, the things that are done well, continue to be done well, because, you know, we are fight fans. We want to see great fights. But issues with fighter pay, performance-enhancing drugs, that the change of ownership doesn't affect the continued effort to really erase these issues in the sport.
Now, you tweeted earlier, Josh Gross, about the, I guess, William Morris. Are they the ones buying the UFC?
Well, they help facilitate the deal. It's a consortium of groups that are coming together. Chinese group, media companies. I mean, the UFC has grown so much that it takes a deal like that to be put in place. I mean, $4.2 billion is a lot of money, if that's the accurate figure. But they've been flirting with selling for a long time. I think it really boils down to right time, right place. I mean, you're talking about issues in the sport. You're talking about potentially the Muhammad Ali Act being expanded to mixed martial arts. They may change the structure of the sport. Right now, the UFC has the best of all worlds, right? They get to treat their fighters like independent contractors when they want to, employees when they want to. The fighters, generally speaking, don't know much about the financials. All that may change. Perhaps the fighters come together for an association or a union. That may change a lot. So this all makes sense. It all makes sense. And you're talking about a situation when Lorenzo Fertitta probably wants to go back to his casino business. I think that's got a lot to do with the decisions here. There's talk about perhaps investing in the Raiders or an NHL team coming to Las Vegas.
Okay.
So, you know, these are smart guys who ran the business for 15 years. And if the reports are true, and you know, I've heard whispers for a long time about sales. You know, it's one of those things that you say it enough, it's going to be true. I think finally there's enough smoke and there's fire to suggest to me that this is real. Things that I'm hearing. I know that the bids apparently were closed this weekend, and the groups involved obviously are very real. You know, your power players in the media business and the sports business. Right. So, you know, a lot of to be determined what this means. I think we know a couple constants, right? That mixed martial arts is an amazing sport.
Yes.
That the fighters will compete as hard as they can. It'll be entertaining for fans. What that means, you know, otherwise in terms of the structure of the UFC or, you know, one dominant promotion or whatever it is, I think you'll see the UFC expand globally even more now. I think you'll see them going to China more than they ever have. And so, you know, it's just continued progression in the sport. These are growing pains, if you want to call them that. It's an evolution. You know, the people who were around when the AFL-NFL merger happened, you wonder what kind of those discussions there were at the time, you know? So I think this is one of those moments. You know, everybody talked about when the UFC bought Pride, that it was all done and there was nothing else to do. Well, that's not true. A competitor came along and they bought those guys in Strikeforce. And say what you want about Bellator, they're owned by Viacom, and Viacom really loves Bellator, and Bellator makes money for them and does really well. So, you know, there's the sport is a global sport. And I think this may do more than we've seen prior to really expanding it all over the world. China is a mass market that hasn't been opened up to MMA yet. There's a lot of repercussions from a deal like this. There are people who are now very rich. You know, they were already rich. Now they're very, very rich. And, you know, we'll see if that redounds to the fighters at all or what that means. But, you know, it's interesting times. And for, you know, people like us who get to cover and discuss the sport, you know, I don't care what they do with their business, but it's interesting to follow along and watch and see how it affects everybody else in the sport, because UFC has always driven this space, Zuffa especially, and people worry about guys like that and the passion of Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta and that not being around anymore. What does that mean? Now you're owned by a conglomerate, and who are the people making the decisions, and who are the real shot callers? So. A lot to unfold, and we'll see how it plays out. But very interesting story.
Lots and lots of what ifs. Now, if you're a fighter for the UFC, is there any kind of concern you should have, or maybe optimism for the future?
I think if I were a fighter, I'd assume that, okay, if we're having new management come in, if there is, we know that they're trying to, it's a business at the end of the day. The Reebok deal isn't universally pleasing to all the fighters. I think that's safe to say. So if I were them, I'd say if we're having new management, let's really rediscuss those kinds of deals. Maybe try to find a little more leeway as far as getting sponsors back in the cage for at least individual fighters, if not on the canvas of the UFC. So I think small steps like that, certainly fighters are going to raise the questions more if they see there's this big shift going on at the top.
I just hope we don't go back to 2-a-day shows. God, those were brutal. Huh? There's one from Australia and there's one from Evansville. We're going to cover both of them right here at AfterBuzz TV. No, we're not going to do that, guys.
I mean, going back to what I mentioned
Those days are
earlier,
gone.
Going back to mention about Joanne Calderwood, who's kind of like, literally she says that she's got to save up just so she can train at TriStar again.
Right.
I mean, is she going to be affected by it? Do you think she's going to have a better payout later on in the future? I mean, from what I heard, they made a $158 million profit last year. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that going to go to any fighters? But like I said, it's a business. The business is make the most money.
I think, my gut would, obviously, not knowing the details or certainly not of who's buying it, let alone their business philosophy. On one hand, if the Fertittas and Dana get out, I would think then that it either the new owners come in and they're a bit more fair with the fighters, gracious and magnanimous with pay, and fighters continue to value the UFC as being the place to be, right?
Yes.
Or there's some struggle with the changeover, and things don't go smoothly. They might look like, financially, from a fighter's perspective, might look like things aren't going to change for them. To which end, I think that Bellator becomes even that much more enticing. They become more reasonable to walk away and consider something like a Bellator or depending on what the coffers are for World Series of Fighting and what day of the week that is, but it's it kind of lets, if these guys, if the three go away, Dana and the Lorenzos, the Fertittas, excuse me, if they walk away from the UFC, then I think it makes it easier for fighters to not have as much doubt about walking away from the UFC as well.
Mm-hmm. I think what it boils down to, what position do these new owners have? And it's important to note that Dana White, as the president of the UFC, will still be around for the immediate future. So I take that to assume that they understand that if it's not broken, all the way, say what you will about other issues, but as a whole, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I don't see them doing something crazy like they're going to bring in a tournament format like the old Bellator. They understand that
extreme.
They understand that, changes like that aren't going to be made, but it really just remains to be seen what stance that these new owners, you said there were several of them, WME, IMEG, the Daly and Wanda, the Kraft Group, Tencent Holdings. You have to see, that's 4 groups, what I understand.
Yeah, look, it's an international play. I mean, you have 2 Chinese, portions to that. I think the opening up the Chinese market is really where they're looking at, where have the UFC not been able to go and monetize their business yet? And China is obviously enormous. Look, I think the Kraft people are the New England Patriots. So, you're talking about sports people, and I don't know. It's a lot of things to be determined. The UFC ran it like a family business for a long time. Yes. the business has grown enormously. They created more than a fight company; they created a media company, and that's what you're buying into. The questions I have is, if you're spending $4.2 billion, you better feel pretty confident about what you're getting. And I think the fight side is less important than the media side that they've built up, the Fight Pass platform that they built up. You're talking about the UFC is going to be up for a new television rights deal here in a couple years. So they know all that, and they have to also know that the fighters may be pushing back, and the U.S. government may be looking to bust up their business model. And so again, a lot of what ifs, but these are smart people with a lot of money, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them once this thing is finalized and done, because just because a bid is closed, they still have to go through a diligence phase, and there'll be a transition phase and all sorts of stuff. But again, fun. It's never boring in MMA, right? I mean, the news cycle in the sport is insane.
It's always something to talk about. Because then here, obviously we cover the fights, but there's always something new to talk about, whether it's about Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey or just some other promotion that happened. Obviously, unfortunately, we lost Kimbo Slice not too long ago. In my opinion, a forgotten pioneer of the business. Here's a guy who main evented the first prime time on network TV. Kimbo Slice. In my opinion, he's again pioneer. Might not agree with other people, but again, my opinion.
Well, he was certainly always a different character for MMA and an interesting one. I know that he was a family man and he has children, so my thoughts go out to them. But definitely just sad to lose him so young. He was only 42. He's got those big muscles, but he's suffering from heart issues, if I'm not mistaken. So just my thoughts go out to the family at this time. That's what I really think when I saw what happened with Kimbo.
We were around, especially I was obviously working with Pro Elite, less so with Elite XC, but Josh covered Kimbo quite a bit during that time. So he can speak better than I can about a one-on-one interaction with whether you want to call it Kimbo or Kevin Ferguson. But what I can say is that in the Pro Elite office, which I remember us having a conversation. You said you hadn't stepped in there, but your reporting of what was going on in the office during the business upheaval was impeccable and really spot on. It was as if you were there. He motivated. He was a character that I think the promoters were excited about Kimbo for sure, and he was somebody that clearly throughout his career captured everybody's attention and imagination. And the thing about the staff of Pro Elite, and especially Elite XC, a lot of them didn't really know the fight game at all, but they were thrown into the mix of this new media company, this new fight promotion, and it was exciting. There was a lot of youthful people, a lot of energy, and they really drew energy from Kimbo. The fact that we had this guy who was hopefully going to lead the way and pave new fortunes for the whole company and really get us up flying. Everyone really bought into that, and there was no deny. I wasn't involved with any of the Kimbo stuff at all, but it was blatant. He brought a certain spirit to the company office, even without necessarily being there very often. So there's that to be said about his legacy, which I think only a handful of people, obviously, the Pro Elite staff, would know about.
Look, Kimbo's a character that a lot of people know, and I think he does. I think he is important, as you said. He drew a lot of eyeballs to mixed martial arts. For many people, they became introduced to the sport through Kimbo Slice. You can criticize him for being a fighter or whatever. He wasn't a top level champion. That's fine. He was who he was, and he was always honest about it. He was always a guy saying, "I'm just trying to improve as a mixed martial artist. I'm trying to learn the game." And if you actually listened to him and believed him, and I did, then there was a lot of value in that. He was a sweet guy, and he was a genuine guy. And people tried to build up a persona around him and trying to make him this scary character. And in some ways he sold that because that's how he could make money. But that wasn't really who he was. He was quiet and he wanted to be around his family. And when there was a big party going down, most of the time he just wanted to be in his hotel room and just chilling. So he was a unique person, and kind of a crazy thing. The day that he died, he was still talking about fighting. He was on the phone with people from Viacom and Bellator and talking about what's next. Let's plan for the next thing. And he made the most of what he had, and he came from not a lot, and he worked hard, and he tried to instill the right things in his family, and he should be remembered for a lot of reasons. Yeah.
We have a couple minutes left, so we're gonna wrap up soon. But I did want to cover your book, Ali versus Inoki, probably the first MMA fight ever.
I wouldn't say that. The most famous, the most infamous one. Yeah, Muhammad Ali being involved.
I was going to say, would you like to hold it up for the fans?
Get the right shot right here.
No. Me personally, I'm a big MMA fan, but I'm also a big pro wrestling fan. And obviously, Antonio Inoki, WWE Hall of Famer. In New Japan, he's legend would be an understatement. I mean, here's again
in Japan, legend would be an understatement.
Exactly. I mean, this guy is a god over there. Throw in Muhammad Ali. I mean, now you got these two, the irremovable, you can't even say it, the irremovable force versus the
immovable object,
the
irresistible force.
And this is years before Hogan and Andre. How much did you have to, I mean, obviously, your love for it, is undeniable, but just going into that book, how did you prepare to get the research? Obviously, this happened over 30 years ago. I mean, how did you get all that?
Yeah, the 40th anniversary is June 26th, so we're coming up on it. Look, the internet's an amazing thing. I don't know what it's like to write a book without the internet. This is my first book. It was certainly helpful. It's kind of amazing. As I looked at it and I looked at the index and all the stuff I wrote about, I was shocked. Actually, it surprised me. One topic takes you to another, and it's this cascading series of events. I felt like this would be a great first book for me. Obviously, anything involving Muhammad Ali is captivating. I started working on this book a year and a half ago. I really wrote it in about 3.5 months, but the process, the research and interviewing, I interviewed over 30 people, a lot of people who were close to Ali at the time. I tried to get as close to the pro wrestling folks as I could. Pro wrestling's not my wheelhouse. It's not my favorite thing, but I learned to really respect pro wrestling. Its importance on combat sports, its importance, especially on mixed martial arts, is undeniable. You can't separate them in Japan. They're the same thing. And, this one event is one that most people consider a footnote in Ali's career, a farce, a dud, a negative moment, which is interesting in its own way. There's not a lot of negative moments associated with Muhammad Ali, but I think reframing 40 years later now with some hindsight, with understanding that mixed martial arts is a global sport that it is, this match is much more important than people think it is, and revisiting it now, I think, is a good time to do that.
I mean, especially a little bittersweet, and not too long ago he did pass away. Muhammad Ali. Again, bittersweet because now you got people wanting a lot of Muhammad Ali, going on YouTube.
Yes.
Now, obviously, you can buy a book, can kind of showcasing his.
Yeah, it's officially out on Tuesday, June 21st. You can buy it early pre-sale on Amazon and still get it there, but it should be in retailers everywhere on the 21st. And yeah, it was tough that Friday that he passed. I mean, on top of just having the emotions of having someone like Muhammad Ali pass away. Which I think most people were affected by in some fashion. Certainly, for me, it was hard. And I was like, I feel like I was almost living with him for a year, and now I have to go sell something with his name on it. How do I do that without coming off like I'm trying to profit off his death? And,
of course.
But I think. I think the book is really meaningful, and so I don't think it's a frivolous thing, and I feel really actually positive about the experience, and I feel that being able to tell his story, this story at this moment in time, I'm grateful to do it.
If anything, it's a celebration of what happened.
Yeah. I was just gonna say 2 notes because I'm glad you addressed that. It should be noted that the plans for this book and its release were all well before the issues that occurred, and it also happened very quickly for Ali, sadly. But my question, learning about Ali, obviously he's such a big figure just worldwide. Is there anything about the mythology or just his career that in doing this deeper research, it's not just writing an article, as a writer, you and I know, when you're really doing a research, you're learning about the inner workings of what made these people tick as competitors. Was there anything that stood out to you about Ali and in just bringing this story to life?
Yeah, that's a good question because you think you know so much about the man, right? There's been so much written about him, and you walk in with some ideas. It sounds weird considering how great a boxer he was, but I was surprised by how competitive he was. The greatest of all time and all that. You think it's kind of like a shtick, and it's like his persona. It's not really who he was. That's who he was. I was also, when he committed to something, he did it. If he said he was going to do something, he did it. This wasn't a guy who was easy to commit to something and walk away from it. And I also think that his energy and his ability to have an interaction with, it didn't matter who you were, a regular person on the street or the President of the United States, he treated you the same way. and you were awestruck by him in the same way. You sort of fell drunk in love with him, and he knew that. He knew he had the ability. He just wanted to have a positive energy exchange with people, and he did that constantly. I heard so many stories of him just interacting with regular folks, and for them, it's the biggest moment of their life. They have this amazing Muhammad Ali story, and for him, it was just another day. And his energy was boundless. He never got tired. Never. It was amazing to learn about this man and really delve into his life, and to check on this sort of footnote, this moment that didn't really matter too much. That in the end, I think matters a lot, and hopefully people revisit that and check out the book.
Yeah, I know. Book Circle Online. You guys talked a lot more. Went into more detail about it. You can find that on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you're listening to this on iTunes, thank you so much for listening. I want to thank everybody here, especially Josh Gross, for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
If you guys want to plug your Twitter and where can people find you, where can people read your articles, or where can all the
I'm still JTan716 all over that internet.
All over the internet. I'm writing for The Guardian these days, and I'm on Twitter, YAY_YEE.
Amazing. I'm Gabriel, and you can find me on Twitter all the time at Double G on TV.
Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, G Hermoza, GHERMOZA. I want to thank you so much. We will be back in a few weeks to cover that whole UFC 200 Fight Night fiasco. It's going to be a fun time. We'll talk all about it on Twitter. Feel free to tweet us anytime. AfterBuzz TV, we're out.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.